Information-fueled.
Opinion-driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
7:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to your friends. Welcome on into your Monday, February 3rd. Hope you're doing well. James Carafano joins us, foreign policy military analyst with the Heritage Foundation. James, always great to have you on. Headlines over the weekend: Iran has been, they say secretly, I think we all know what they're up to, but secretly creating a nuclear weapon that could reach Europe with an 1,800-mile radius. They say that these missiles could reach their enemy, Israel, as well. James, did you see this report over the weekend, and what do you think?
So I've always maintained that we are at the point where Iran becoming a established nuclear power is not a technical issue. It is a political issue. Iran will declare themselves a nuclear state when they think they can get the maximum benefit from it. I actually thought they might do it while Biden was still in office, because Biden would have done nothing. So, and I got to add this, which I think is really important. And this is a lesson learned from Ukraine, where we saw the Russians attack Ukraine with missiles and drones and the whole range of weapons aimed at their infrastructure and population center. Lots of people have the capability to do this now. And so whether you're in Europe or the Middle East or even here in the United States, you need to get much more seriously about defending your own airspace from everything from small drones up to ballistic missiles. That's the reality of the modern world in which we live.
President Trump has talked about an Iron Dome, and similar to the one that Israel has. Of course, the United States is far larger than Israel. So based on what you just said, what do you think about President Trump and talking about building the same kind of Iron Dome that Israel has?
I think we're going to have to get into the cruise missile drone defense business the way we've already been in the ballistic missile defense business. And for folks who don't understand this, it's range and trajectory. So ballistic missiles have the longest range. They also have the most difficult trajectory to deal with, because they actually go up in outer space and come back down. Cruise missiles fly very flat, a lot slower. You have hypersonic missiles, which fly flat and a lot faster. Then you have drones, which can go from a few feet up to 100 feet and be very small, or carry payloads up to, as we've seen in Ukraine, 200-pound bombs. So it's a very sophisticated threat. Part of the reason why the president's put so much emphasis on Canada and Greenland is you want to push back the space where guys can launch things at you from. So this gets really super geeky, right? The most stable environment to not have somebody attack you is what's called an offense-defense mix, which means you have the capability to smack them in the face if they get rowdy, but you also have the capability to block a blow if they come at you. And so if you want to live in a stable world, it is conventional deterrence, which is, armies, tanks, Marines, and strategic deterrence, which is nuclear weapons, and it's the capacity to counter against the enemy's attack on you, whether they're cyber attacks, missile attacks, or physical invasion.
They say that the weapon design system that Iran is using were actually created by North Korea. Kind of brings to mind the whole discussion of the axis of evil from way back in the George W. Bush days.
Right.
So it's like you just said. So these countries, they have a lot of partnerships, and they have the ability to do this. So we just simply need to be able to protect ourselves. So do you think that Iran currently does have nuclear weapons, or how close are they?
I think that they have the technical and physical capacity to build a nuclear weapon anytime they want.
Okay.
Now,
and yeah,
I don't know if they have or they haven't, but
right. Because they're very secretive, and now the big question is, and there's some people, I think you and I may have spoken about this before, there are some people that say, okay, well then what we need to do is we need to take a preventive attack and take out their launching systems. But I don't know if that is the right way to go, because a lot of people would say, well, that's basically a declaration of war on Iran.
So first of all, so people understand there's three things that you need to be a nuclear threat. One is you need, and which is actually the hardest, which is the nuclear fuel with uranium or plutonium, which is pure enough that you could actually create a nuclear explosion. And sadly, and this started under Barack Obama, we actually gave permission, stupidly, to the Iranians to process their own nuclear fuel. That's what got us in this situation. The second thing is you need to build a bomb, right, around the nuclear fuel.
Yep.
And then the third is you need to have the missile that can reach, or delivery system that can reach the target. We know for a fact, indisputable, that they already have the missiles. We know for a fact, indisputable, that they have the designs on how to build a bomb. We know that. And they and we actually know from the data that we have that they have the capacity and capability to build sufficient nuclear fuel to make a weapon. So that's kind of there. I'm not a big fan of preemptive warfare. That's not who we are. We defend ourselves. Now, there's a difference between preventive warfare and preemptive active self-defense called anticipatory self-defense, which is if a guy's coming at you with a baseball bat, you don't have to wait till he hits you with the bat, smack him in the face. So, but that's different from saying, oh, I don't like that guy. He may come after me someday. I'm just going to hit him in the face now. I don't think that's the way to go. Right now, I think the answer to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat is to make these guys feel so threatened that they're terrified and afraid of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things here, and of course, we all don't want to go back in the history of the Iranian nuclear deal, but that was a lot of people say that was a terrible deal for a number of different reasons. But the bottom line is President Trump right now, you know that Iran has a lot of problems, especially when it comes to their economy. Their economy is spiraling. Some are talking about how Hamas and Hezbollah, they've been crippled. You have an emboldened Israel right now who attacked their territory last year. And so it does seem to me that there's a number of things that President Trump needs to do, especially when it comes to their economy, and that is get more aggressive on sanctions.
So squeeze them really hard, because what we've traditionally seen is when the Iranian regime feels threatened, they actually get more conservative and more risk averse. And then what you want to do is build up the coalition between the Arabs and the Israelis so they work together in trust and confidence, and they have sufficient capacity and capability so they prevent a real conventional deterrent against the expansion of Iran or their surrogates. And then you have the U.S. nuclear umbrella over that. That's a really stable environment. I don't like wars. You know, a war is a great leap into the dark. Even if you think you're going to win and everything else, you have to deal with the aftermath. They hardly solve anything. So I like people to know that if they try to start a war with me, they're going to not have a very good day. It's the whole idea of peace through strength, but actually fighting wars if you don't have to, not a good idea.
7:15, Nashville's Morning News. James Carafano is joining us. James, a couple of other things I want to speak to you about after the traffic. President Donald Trump taking out some ISIS terrorists living in Somalian caves, and Israeli hostages being released as well. Going to talk about that, including an Israeli American. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. President Trump taking out some ISIS terrorists apparently living in some Somalian caves. What do we know about this particular group and ISIS generally speaking?
Well, this actually is a really positive sign from the president that he takes combating terrorism really seriously. And when you think of all the things that he has going on, the fact that he took enough attention to identify an emergent threat and take it out. So it's the same ISIS that he dealt with during the first term that metastasized in Iran after President Obama pulled the troops out of Iraq, and you had Iraq and Syria, a huge ISIS caliphate, and then Trump crushed it. These guys are still peppered around the region. There's some in Afghanistan, actually fighting against the Taliban. They're in Somalia, Sahel, and some other places. So what you see here, I know this is kind of hard for people to wrap their heads around because you don't follow this stuff day to day, but what you see here is getting it right. The wrong way was kind of the Clinton-Obama way, which is ignore it and hope it goes away. and it metastasizes and becomes a huge problem for you, whether it was 9/11 or the caliphate that blew up under Obama. The other way is the Bush way was wrong, because essentially he tried to solve the world's problems and exterminate all the terrorists, and that's just completely unrealistic and overreach and really not necessary. I don't want to sound crude here, but it's more like mowing the grass. Right? You're never going to get rid of all the weeds. You're never going to keep the grass from growing, but you mow the grass occasionally, keep things under control. And strikes like this against people that were probably planning not just terrorist attacks in Somalia, but trying to coordinate activities that would impact the U.S. and its allies worldwide. You got to clean that stuff up.
And it sends a message to not only ISIS but Al Qaeda and the generally speaking the terrorists across the world. In other news, James Carafano joining us. We're seeing Israeli hostages being released, of course. Israeli-American Keith Siegel was released. Hamas is getting their prisoners released. And obviously, and James, you and I have spoken about this before, NBC News reporting 18 hostages have been released by Hamas. In exchange, you've got 583 Palestinian prisoners. Now, I know that this is a complicated question and answer, but who is winning in these negotiations?
Well, look, they always do this. I mean, you can like it, not like it, doesn't matter. The Israelis will always trade people to get their people back. They can always kill these guys later. I mean, it's just crude, but just very honest.
Yeah.
And they're going to do it, and they're doing it. And I'm guessing that this game's just about over, because I think we all know that there probably aren't many more live people to be returned, that were in the tens, and this will play out. But I think it will play out because I think Hamas will not risk holding on to hostages in the end and raising the ire of Trump once again. So this will play out. We'll move on to the next phase of the future, which is we try to figure out how these guys can live together in the region. And the problem, this is a tragedy. This is I don't want to say it's all our fault, but Trump had this under control. It was unbelievably stable, and the leadership in Gaza and the West Bank was completely marginalized. And the Arab world was moving on with its life. And then Joe Biden came in and said, well, we don't need to do any of that. And it just blew up in our face. It's so tragic. None of these people had to die.
You're absolutely right, James Carafano. Last question. President Trump's mass deportation, of course, continues. You know all about that. He's opening up Gitmo to house these bad guys. And were you surprised that he decided to do that?
I think it's freaking brilliant. Because I got to tell you, if you are one of these guys, that's the last place you want to go. And they will self-deport first.
Yeah.
And so I no matter how many guys we send there, way more will just leave the country just not to face that risk. So I think it's a brilliant move. And by the way, it's perfectly legal. It's perfectly appropriate. We've always had migrant detention centers at Gitmo to handle if another Cuban boat lift or something else. So I've seen these facilities. It's absolutely totally the right thing to do.
James Carafano, I always love your analysis. Thank you very much for joining us here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. And he's absolutely right about how the horrific terrorist attack on Israel did not have to happen. And when Donald Trump says that never would have happened if I was in office, he's not just, bloviating. I mean, the man is speaking the truth about that. You've got, and James had to go, but, you've got Biden who comes in, and I know that you folks that listen all the time, I know that you know this, but Biden comes in and he completely ignores the sanctions that Trump had placed on Iran. So all of a sudden, Iran gets infusion of billions and billions of dollars, and they are then able to fund Hamas and Hezbollah. And then we saw what we saw as Hamas attacks Israel, and that is where we are now with these hostages being released. And so hopefully President Trump can get that region back under control. I think that he's off to a really good start with taking out the terrorists in Somalia, and I believe that he's going to continue down that path. It is 7:21 on Nashville's Morning News. Hey, coming up, an update on Congressman Andy Ogles. You know that the FBI has been going after him big time. We do have an Andy Ogles update and a whole lot more audio that you have to hear, as well as the DNC. They've been, of course, as you know, trying to pick a leader. We're speaking with E.J. Host about this. The audio is just funny. I'm just going to tell you, it is funny. And it's Monday, and so you might be in a bad mood. You want to stick around for this audio because it is absolutely hysterical, as these deranged Democrats still haven't learned anything.